Scott. I'm the director of Fathom. We're a multi-sensory branding marketing specialist, and we use or consider all of the senses just like you do. Okay, so you're using all of the senses all of the time. But what makes us different is that we underpin that with scientific research into how our senses are fundamentally interlinked, and we can unpick those linkages in order to afford us a better understanding of how we can apply that to whatever it might be, whether it's branding design, whether it's communications, whether it's TVCs, whatever. The kind of people that we work with do a lot of work in food and drink. People generally say, what's the most multi-sensory experience that you have? And people will say, well, it's when I'm eating. Of course, I'm using all my senses all of the time, even before, the smells and the sounds and everything leading up to that experience. But that transcends into every other aspect as well. So working with automotive partners in terms of developing an in-car but also dealership experience that is more in tune with delivering a better experience for them. What makes us different is everything which we do is underpinned by the science. So I'm going to take you on a little bit of a scientific kind of talk, okay? So bear with me. All right. So we love this quote because it kind of sums up the entire ethos and philosophy of what we do. So we are not thinking beings that feel, we are feeling beings that think, okay? So we like to all think they're rational human beings that come to reasoned decisions about everything in life. Forget that. We're all out of control. Okay? We'll make instinctive decisions about everything, and we don't really know why we've made those decisions. Well, I've bought this, I like that person, or what have you. Some people call it, like a gut feeling or intuition or wherever it might be. But what leads to those feelings and behaviours is all of the sensory information which we're absorbing. And a lot of that is unconscious. So we're not aware of it, but it's having this fundamental impact on the way in which we then feel our mood and emotions at any point in time, which lead to our decisions and our behaviours. So there's two levels to the science. The first level is around memory and emotion. So you will all know a piece of music, what have you, that can literally make you cry when you listen to it, okay? You'll know a smell that might take you to a particular place in time, what have you, and brings back those emotions and feelings that you had when you first were listening to it. And we can use those codes, those shapes and forms of the sensorial information to deliver better experiences on the whole. So an example of that, I'm going to start spraying some stuff, don't be terrified. Don't be terrified. Right. Is this thing called the Provençal Rosé paradox, okay? So imagine yourself in an auberge in France, and you're sat there enjoying, with the rolling hills of lavender, enjoying a meal, okay? And there's the sun beating down on the back of your neck, you've got the smell of the lavender around you, and then the waiter comes over and you got the smell, you got the sound of the French chatter of people around you and what have you. And the waiter comes over and he says, well, what would you like to drink with this? And you go, oh. Well, he wouldn't say that. He would say, oh, what would you like to drink? And you would say, oh, I don't know, what do you recommend? And he goes, well, there's this amazing rosé wine, okay? Would you like to try it? It's the local favourite. So you go, yeah, okay, let's go for it. So he brings over a carafe of this wine and he pours it out, and it is literally the best glass of rosé you have ever had in your life, okay? And you say to him, where is this from? It's like, what the hell? He says, I won't do the accent again. He says, it's from a local vineyard down the road and it's €2 a bottle. You're like, wow. So you go there the next day and you fill up, like the boot and everything. And you drive back to home and you kind of store this stuff up and you think, I'm going to save that for a really special occasion because it's amazing. Okay, we're in Cambridge. So raining January day in Cambridge, and you've got your friends around and you go, what are we going to give them? Okay, let's crack open that amazing rosé, what we had when we were in France. And you pour it out, and everyone literally wants to spit it out because it's so disgusting. And what has happened is all of the sensorial aspects of the experience have influenced your enjoyment and fundamentally your perception of what you're tasting. So we can use this. So we worked at Heston Blumenthal at the Fat Duck, developing a dish we did a lot of things regarding the guest experience there, developing a dish with him called Sound of the Sea, which is this experience, the paradox, put into motion. So it's a seafood dish brought to the table, edible sand, tapioca, sea foam, sashimi, seaweed, brought to the table, and it comes with a conch shell with an iPod in it. And when you put the earbuds in, you listen to the sound of the sea. Okay, and it's a first-person, three-dimensional aspect. So this is different to just like listening to the sea, right? It's like you are there. And when we took this into the laboratory at Oxford University and measured the effect that this was having on people's enjoyment of the dish, what we found was when people eat the dish and they're listening to the soundscape, they will say they perceive it as fresher, fishier, better quality, and they'll pay more for it than when it's not present, okay? And you're going to be paying a lot for it, right? At Heston's restaurant. And it's just showing you how we can use these memories that we've all learned and to deliver more emotive experiences. So we can really draw upon all of these things in relation to branding and marketing. So people talk a lot about distinctive brand assets, right? And then we'll talk about, it's the shape of the bottle, or it's like, the logo, and it's a label goes this way and what have you. And you think, no, actually, it's a lot of the things that you don't necessarily think about. It can be the sound that's related to it, the crack of the bottle when you open it. It can be all of these things, not necessarily visual, but we're all in marketing trained to think visually about everything all the time. And actually, it's multi-sensorial aspects that can actually deliver a bigger effect. And then, last part of science lesson. So there's a deeper level to all of this, which is utterly fascinating, which is cross-modal or cross-sensory associations. So we all have, and these are universal and largely cross-cultural linkages that we all have, okay, between the senses. So this isn't that, I might experience it and you experience it differently. This is all of us experience this, cross-modal relationships. So you give people, we did this live on Radio 4, you give people coffee and 4 different coloured mugs and you say to them, what do you think it tastes like? They will say it's sweeter from the red mug, milder from the blue mug, and watery, kind of weaker from a yellow mug. And then you say to them, and this is the fascinating part, okay, which one do you prefer? And everyone will say, I like the one in a red mug, okay? They'll point to it. They won't say red or anything. They'll point at that one. Why? Because it's richer, thicker, better quality, better beans within it, whatever. They'll just make up anything off the top of their head, okay? And no one is going to turn around to you and say, I like that one because you've served it to me in a red mug, right? Okay, yet we know that that's the one determining factor that's having such powerful influence over their perception of the experience. I love this one. White wine tastes 40% more zingy and refreshing when you're listening to Blondie. Which is just a cool thing. And if you don't like your white wine, you like your red wines, you like your Malbecs and your Merlots, then you might want to be listening to something that's big, orchestral, operatic, or what have you, and that will influence your perception of the taste of it such that it's up to 40% more full-bodied and rich. Okay? So all of these codes and everything in sound and what have you are having these effects on what you are experiencing, whether it's taste, sound, whatever it might be. Okay, so the next question, I want you to, just shout out, okay? I'm going to show you ask you a question. Shout out the first thing that comes into your head, okay? Right. Is the taste of a lemon fast or slow? We did this on BuzzFeed. Over 300,000 people. The taste of a lemon is fast. What is that all about? Yeah? So you're associating a taste with a speed now. Okay? Classic for psychological test. One of these shapes is Kiki, the other is Booba. Okay? Who thinks this one is Kiki? Right. That's nuts, right? We're associating a shape and form in what we're saying with a visual image, right? So the point of this is that if you are a brand that's developing a new carbonated lemon drink, right? We know that your name needs to be more Kiki than Booba, right? We know that your music that you use to accompany when you're launching it should be faster rather than slower. We know that it's higher frequencies, so we know that when you open the can it should be tsh rather than tsh, whatever. And all of these things cue you up for the perception and of the actual experience that you're having when you enjoy it. Right, this is nuts. Right, so there is a hierarchy of the senses that you need to be aware of. And I'm just going to play this now. So in certain situations, one sense will outdo all of the other senses, okay? So I want you to watch this guy, okay? Watch him on the left, then watch him on the right. Then close your eyes. He's always saying the same thing, right? And then watch him when he's saying it here. Who's hearing far? Who's hearing bar? It's exactly the same thing, and yet what you're seeing overrides what you're hearing. So you need to be aware of that in situations where you're considering what you're doing through multisensory design, because often one sense will utterly trump everything else which you're doing. Right, let's get a bit deeper into sound. So much effort, so much emphasis is put on the visual, okay? I find this utterly fascinating and yet very, very exciting, because what you're doing visually in terms of branded content, right, in terms of effectiveness, pales into significance regarding what you're doing regarding sound. And these are sonic brand cues. So this isn't music, this isn't, people will say, oh, you know, you need to choose a track that's like really on brand and it's cool and what have you. Has hardly any effect, okay, in terms of effectiveness. What really has the effect is the sonic brand cues. What do we mean by that? That is the elements of sound that are communicating you something about A, the brand, or B, the product as well. So an example of that is that we can all tell the temperature of something through the sound that it makes. Okay, so listen to this. So first one. Which is the hot one? Nuts, right? We can all tell the temperature of something pouring. So have you ever been in a situation where you've got this tea bag and you pour the kettle, you pour the water in and you're like, that's not doing it. I haven't boiled it. Oh well, okay. So we can apply that. So we work with Tiger, a beer brand, applying that for their ads, okay? So this is going to be really loud now. So the environment is really hot, right? And then when you see that it's really cold. And you go, even I now, when I'm looking at that, don't see that much difference within it. But you put this through consumer testing or whatever, and people say, I want to reach out and grab that now. It's cold and hot environment. I really want that. You know? So it's not these things that are necessarily overt, but actually are designed in a way that they're having a fundamental influence or an effective influence over perception. And it's kind of good news. So if you take all of these things and you put them together, you take this multisensorial, based on scientific science approach, then you get these types of outputs, right? I've been doing this for 15 years. Right, you can show this slide and this stuff to most marketing departments and brand leaders and whatever, and they're kind of, you know, it's like, but it's undeniable, right? So I would encourage you to consider it in the work which you're doing, I would say. Okay, so an example of how we sort of do this, what it means. Okay, so this is powerful, powerful stuff, right? So, and it doesn't affect just behavior and perception, it affects physiology as well. So we did a study in the US in hospitals using a congruent, which means everything makes sense in what you're doing, experience in wards for patients recovering from heart surgery, okay? So there was the sound of lapping waves, there was the smell of vanilla and coconut in the space. There was also the use of Bacon Miller Pink. There's a hue of pink called Bacon Miller Pink, right? Which is scientifically proven to reduce people's heart rate and calm people down. They use it in drunk tanks, right? To get people to calm down and what have you, okay? So you can use that in the environment. And if you do this thing, all being equal, patients require significantly lower pain medication and will be discharged on average 3 days earlier than when you don't. That's how powerful this sort of thing is, okay? And yet no one really thinks about it. So, what do we do? So, this is a Diagio brand, a single malt whiskey brand called the Singleton. And this gives you an idea of how we might potentially work with a client. So, Who works with visual identity guidelines? Yeah? Right. Every brand will have visual identity guidelines, okay? What about all the other senses, right? Okay? So what, we do a piece of work called Multisensorial Design Guidelines, which considers like how the brand expresses itself through all of the senses, not just visual, but importantly, based on the science, such that what you're doing through sound is working in harmony with what you're doing through visual, is working in harmony with what you're doing through texture and material as well. So that's our starting point. And then we can create brand assets which are potentially non-visual based upon that. So this will be the kind of thing which we're doing. The Singleton was all about being vivid nature, kind of hyper-real experience at the time. And to launch it, we did an event which was called the Sensorium. And people arrived at a venue in London, and they were given a single measure of the Singleton whiskey, and then they moved through 3 different spaces, so that it was always the same thing which they had in their hands. So they knew it was the same thing which they were tasting, okay? So like you're handed a different thing or whatever. So you're fighting it. You're kind of going like, I know this is the same damn thing, right, and what have you. But you're moving through these 3 different spaces, and one was to evoke the kind of grassiness on the nose, another was to evoke the sweetness of the taste, and another was the kind of lingering kind of woody finish which you have from the whiskey. And we had Oxford University there writing this thing up and measuring the responses of people to it. And people's taste perception is modulated by up to 30%, right? By the environment that you're in, okay? So every aspect of your situation that you're in when you're tasting something is having an effect on what you're tasting, right? So this, I mean, not so much in the brand and marketing team, but when this got back to the master distillers and what have you, they were like, what the hell? I've dedicated the best part of my life, right, to putting together the perfect notes within whiskey and aging them in the right casks and what have you, and you're telling me that it tastes completely different every time people say, yeah, and it does. But what you can do is start to then apply this sort of approach such that you're controlling as much as you can do the aspects of the multisensorial environment or the glass that you're drinking out of drinking the whiskey out of, to keep it as much in tune with what you originally designed as possible. So then on the back of that, did a brand home where you would go and you would drink the whiskey and have a meal, and there was, based on the sensory guidelines, an environment for the stores, which saw an uplift in sales, and it was basically a restaurant, sort of Michelin-star restaurant, and then you were taken to this place, but they would sell you like the £30,000 bottle of whiskey, if you're that way inclined. And so successful was that they then took it on tour around Asia, kind of developing like a modular experience. And it influences everything. So even the glass that you're drinking out of is affecting what you're tasting, okay? So before it was just this, lazy, frankly, kind of approach to let's just have a glass with a brand on it and what have you. And this, what we designed for them, was also something designed to take it out of the old school image of single malt whiskies, which was very male orientated, kind of, stags and, leather armchairs and cigars and what have you, into a world which is a bit more kind of unisex, into the world of punch and what have you. And their traditional serve was over ice, a single ball of ice. But at the same time, they said that the integrity of the whiskey is everything which we're about. So if you're shoving ice into it, there's a function to it, because the ice melts as you're holding it in your hand and it releases the rich aromas, and you can smell that and what have you. But it kind of detracts from the fact that you're diluting the thing which you're saying is so amazing, right? Okay, so that is a ball of glass in the bottom of it, which is super chilled in the bars. So it's super frozen, drops into the bottom of the glass, which has a happy by effect of it makes it heavier, and we perceive heavier things as being more luxury. But it replicates the effect that you would have from having a ball of ice in it when you warm it up, your hand warms up and it releases the aromas, but it doesn't affect the integrity of the whiskey. So the people that were serving it were able to say, we never, ever sort of affect the integrity of our whiskey. We always, maintain that. And then packaging. So it's simple. It's like this stuff can affect everything. So flavour communication from pack. Chinese New Year was the biggest thing for them. Biggest event or gifting experience for them. And just allowing the pack to talk to you more sensorially about what the flavour is that we're having within. Cool. Right, so, okay. Who likes a cornetto? Okay. All right. So Cornetto came to us and they said, we want the crunchiest product in the world, okay? Because Nestle were bringing out a product called Crunch. How can we beat them off? How can we own this? So what we did is started to look at existing research into what makes something crunchy, okay? Right? And it's all about the sound that it makes. If something sounds crunchy when you're eating it, you believe it is crunchy. That's the ultimate crunch. So we took these insights and conducted research looking at, trying to narrow it down into what are the properties of sound when a cone ice cream, when you're eating it, are going to make it be perceived as ultimately crunchy. And then took that into the lab. So they, instead of producing different ice creams, took a single existing cones and got people to eat them in front of a microphone that then fed back the sound through their headphones, and we could play around with the sounds and the properties that are related to it, okay? And what we found that, we could narrow it down. And it's within a particular frequency range that people, wherever you are in the world, will say that is ultimately crunchy, okay? And their existing product was crispy, not crunchy, right? So we need to change the formulation of the product. So we bring all these things together into a brief, basically a multi-sensorial brief, give it to the R&D department and go away, please, and make us a cone ice cream that sounds and looks like this, okay? Which they did. And that's the kind of sort of examples of what we did. And we're talking about kind of, for them following through these aspects and the codes of the sound into other sensorial aspects as well. And they launched this, and in Italy, which is in the world of gelato, it's like we don't just take any shit ice cream. It's got to be really good. They took it, they loved it, it went really well. And they were able to charge 20% more for it, such that people like it, yeah. So the Perfect Crunch claim is now, if you go and buy it in a store, you'll see this thing. They own it as a claim now. They destroyed Nestlé's attempt at getting into the market and what have you based upon this. And then you take that and you follow it through to every element of what you're doing. So So as I showed earlier with the Tiger beer example, then you're looking to develop crunchiness in relation to the communications which you're doing as well. So it's kind of all about building these aspects into the, and it seems, I mean, I feel a bit like embarrassed showing that, really, because it's like, really? Is that all it is, like the output of this work? But when you see it in consumer testing, the difference is profound. It's like really bizarre, really bizarre. Yeah, so I hope you enjoy it.